Welcome back. You're still watching Up Front here on ENCA. King Goodwill Zwelithini has arrived in KwaNongoma on the final journey home. The monarch passed away yesterday morning after being hospitalized in Durban for high glucose levels. President Cyril Ramaphosa has declared a special official funeral for the late monarch. Our reporters Ubhejane and Siphamandla Goge are following this story for us, and they join us live from KwaNongoma. Let's go back for the time being to Siphamandla Goge. Sipa, you were speaking a little bit earlier to one of the princes about the legacy of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, 50 years of reign. Can you describe for us the life and times of this incredibly important monarch for the African continent?
A difficult one to summarize. Remember, you're talking about the longest serving monarch here for the Zulu nation. For 50 years, he's been on the throne. In December this year, he was looking forward to that 50th Jubilee. He spoke about it in December, and he kept on referring to that if his subjects can give him a gift and a present, it will be to stop gender-based violence, to ensure that they protect women and children. It's not surprising that he kept on hammering that point, because women were very central in the protection of his throne, and the great-grandfathers and other monarchs of the Zulu nation before him were very central. So he used to speak about how women were central when it comes to this Zulu kingdom. But also his legacy, to some people the king was a very controversial figure. To some people, he was a loving man. He was a dearly loved human being. He was someone who put the interest of his subjects at heart. Take, for instance, the recent thorny issue of the land question under Ingonyama Trust. You know, he was very vocal. He was bold, fearless, and some people may say at times arrogant, but that was Amazulu king. But on a lighter note, he was a very loving man, according to those who know him at close range. He was a peace-loving man. His legacy will be that of him ensuring that there is peace and stability in KwaZulu-Natal during that period of political violence when everything else had failed. He was one person who came and ensured that there was peace. He spoke to various leaders of political parties. He was central in ensuring that there is peace and stability in KwaZulu-Natal, whereby thousands of his subjects had perished due to political violence in the 80s and early 90s. His legacy will be that on ensuring that he prioritizes rural development and agriculture, ensuring that he pushes for his subjects to be self-reliant. He was a farmer himself. He used to speak about agriculture a lot, but also he revived Umkhosi Womhlanga, the reed dance ceremony in 1984, because he said one of the reasons and the thinking behind that was to ensure that the flowers of the nation, young girls, the maidens, were groomed in a proper manner. You know, the king used to have a special heart for young girls, women and children in particular. His legacy will be that of ensuring that when it came to matters of health and education, he used to talk about education. He had a foundation, the Bayete Foundation, which focused on education and health matters for rural children and rural women, but also the issue of land. That's what he was known for. He said he's prepared to lay down his life to protect the land. As you would know, that there were calls and recommendations for the Ingonyama Trust Act to be repealed, and that all the land under the trust, if my memory serves me well, 2.8 million hectares of land under the Ingonyama Trust, to be transferred back to the ownership of the state. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, most of his recent speeches, he did not conclude them without touching on that thorny issue of the land question.
Siphamandla, we were hearing earlier that the late monarch also had a very keen ability to speak to parties on both sides of a conflict in order to try and ensure peace and prosperity. Talk to us more about that ability.
Yes, he was a unifier. Many people who have interviewed and spoken to will tell you that, you know, some people would criticize the departed king publicly, and he will call them privately and said, let's meet, let's engage. And when there was a conflict, the king will be the first one to say, no matter what happens, I don't want my subjects to die. I don't want my subjects to suffer. I want my subjects to be well off. But how can we resolve conflict? You know, I know many people always make this reference about the king and his role in ending political violence in KwaZulu-Natal. Let me tell you that in KwaNongoma, where we are, this part of his kingdom was ravaged by taxi violence. I remember years ago, he used to summon rivalry taxi associations to his palace in Kwakangela Mankengane, and he will have a ceremony for them. They will sit on the opposing side, you know, opposite tables, and he will ask them, what is the problem? Why are my subjects keep on dying due to taxi violence? What can be done to stop this? And I can tell you that he was very central in ensuring that in the taxi industry in KwaZulu-Natal as a whole, I'm making reference to or about KwaNongoma because this is where he lived, and he used to say, if I can't foster peace where I live, how can I foster peace throughout the rest of KwaZulu-Natal and throughout the rest of South Africa? Everywhere there was conflict, he will summon the opposing or the warring factions and sit with them and find the lasting solution. And after that, you will see the impact of his intervention. And even those who were fighting, if they want to reconcile but they are unable to approach each other, they will go to him as an elder and say, can you please summon us to the negotiating table? We want to end this. And with speed, he would do that. So he was heavily involved in peace processes throughout KwaZulu-Natal, simply because he used to say, with violence, there can never be development. And with violence, I will not have a nation to rule over. All my subjects will perish. And if my subjects perish, who then do I become the king for? And what is the point of me reigning over a very limited and tiny population? But above that, he used to say, there is no need for violence. There is no need for instability, because he was very religious, and he told me this, that no one lives forever. At some point, we will all have to pass. But he said, as long as we are still alive, we need to ensure that we treat each other with respect, with dignity, but we value life.
Sipamandla, I'm going to go across to our colleague Tuba Villane. Tuba, as we continue talking about the legacy of the late King Goodwill Zwelithini, let's talk again about his commitment to health care. What kind of evidence can you see in KZN as the legacy of King Goodwill Zwelithini's commitment to better health care for his subjects?
One of the program that one would talk about is the reed dance ceremony that the king revived in 1984, where he said, let's have young girls looked after so that they will not involve themselves and participate in sexual activities before getting married. I know that at some point and at some time the king was criticized by some who were saying these young girls are unable to make their own decisions, and they are forced to go for the virginity testing. But we saw many people, including Amakosi, coming from across the province of KwaZulu-Natal, defending the king, and the maidens themselves also came out and said, look, what we are doing, we are not forced, we're doing it because we want to do it. And the king has been praised by many, like my colleagues Pamandla spoke about the relationship and the working relationship between the health minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who is the former MEC of health in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as even the current health MEC in the province, Umamuno Makukusmelane Zulu, also worked very closely with the king, where they will visit a number of places, also preaching, among other issues, that young girls they should look after themselves. And besides that, they were also they were also involving men, because they were saying it might be useless to have girls and teaching them about taking care of themselves. When the people, especially on the issue of gender-based violence, when the people who are perpetrators of gender-based violence, those are perceived to be the men, are left out on this conversation. So he will have conversations and engagement with men and young men to talk to them about how men behave up to the point where they are getting married. So the king has been very much involved in many spheres of the society. I remember when I had an interview with the former premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Willis Mchunu, and one of the things that he said to me was that I don't know how the king managed to deal with this or with all these issues. Today he will be talking about education. Tomorrow he's talking about health, as you will also understand that even with the current situation where the country is faced with the COVID-19 pandemic, the king was very much involved. I remember where he had a visual meeting where he addressed people about the importance of the cleanliness and ensuring that we adhere to COVID-19 regulation. I will, if you will pardon me so that we'll move, I see that there's a car coming. But I was also, again, trying to explain that the king has been very much involved in almost all spheres of the society. When the premier yesterday spoke, he spoke about the involvement of the king in education, saying that he was, just before he got ill, they were visiting all districts. As we understand that there are 11 districts in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. They had already visited 9 of the 11, where they were looking and encouraging learners to be more and participate on education.
Well, thank you very much, Tuba. My last question to you, Siphamandla, very quickly if you can. We know that it's a sensitive issue. As respectfully as possible, can you tell us what protocols will be followed in deciding the succession of the Zulu royal household?
It's a difficult one, not only for everyone, basically, but for the Zulu royal family members, because remember here, this issue has not been discussed for the past 50 years. When the departed king's father passed away, things were different at that time. The issue of succession, there had to be a regent who would act up until the current king or the departed king was ready to take over. So that one will be a difficult one, but we will expect that after the king has been laid to rest, then the royal Zulu family members will have to be seized with that, because there can never be a vacuum in one of the biggest kingdoms in the world.
Well, thank you very much to our reporters in the field, Ubhejane and Siphamandla Goge, both in KwaNongoma there.